Hey guys, TotallyDubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the GoPro Hero 7 Black. Now this is GoPro's latest action camera that boasts HyperSmooth technology, and I'll get into all of that technology within this video. In this video I'm also going to go in depth, so I'm really sorry for the length of it, but nevertheless I want to cover all the features from the build quality, design, the user interface, the app, the photo quality and the recording quality, and of course how it compares to some of its competitors such as the YI 4K Plus action camera, which I've got over here, which also does 4K 60 FPS. Now this camera doesn't come cheap. It is found for around £380 in the UK, whilst in the US it's around $400. Links will be down in the description below. Now the YI 4K Plus, which I'm comparing it to, and the only reason I'm comparing it to is simply because one, I have the camera and I'm able to A/B test them, and secondly because this camera does 4K 60 FPS without electronic image stabilization, whereas the Hero 7 does. But this can be found for around £220, which is extremely cheap for a 4K 60 FPS enabled camera. Now I'll get into the YI in a little bit and compare it to the Hero 7 Black. Now in terms of build quality, I absolutely love what GoPro have done. It's very much like the Hero 5 and the Hero 6 before it. It has a waterproof case built in. In other words, you don't have any external casing. If you're going to a depth of around 10 meters, this camera will survive plunging into a depth of 10 meters, or if you go into a swimming pool, you'll be absolutely fine. If however you want to swim even deeper than that, then you can get the Super Suits external casing, which can take you up to 60 meters of depth. Now the waterproofing casing comes with its advantages and disadvantages. One of its advantages is, well, first of all, it is waterproof, and secondly is that you don't need any sort of extra gear. However, on the sort of cons is that you don't have any tripod mount, which can be quite useful for certain people, and also in terms of connectivity, you do get the micro HDMI input and USB-C inputs. However, there's no other inputs that, if you would like them, they're not handy. So, for example, if you wanted to attach a microphone to it, an external microphone, then you'd kind of negate the waterproof functionalities that are built in. But nevertheless, that's something I just thought I should mention. Now, the battery is removable, and you get a micro SD card, which can also be removed. A micro SD card isn't included, but GoPro among all manufacturers suggest the highest class. So for example, a class 10 U3 32 plus gigabyte micro SD card, and that's I think what's inside this Hero 7 at the moment. Now in terms of battery life, I found myself kind of like mixed results. I got around 2 hours when I was recording at 4K 60 FPS, around 2 hours, so give or take, you know, plus or minus 10 minutes or so, either way, but that is decent enough. However, of course, if you want to be using it for a long period of time, I'd highly suggest getting a power bank, which as I said before, will be negating the waterproof function. If however you do want to keep it waterproof but want to keep going on the go, then get some external batteries, and then you can quickly interchange them without having to charge them up while you're recording. So battery life is decent, however it's not as good, at least in my opinion, than the YI 4K, which lasts a little bit longer, so around half an hour longer at 4K 60 FPS. Now, I was told by GoPro, and I did ask them about it, but does the HyperSmooth technology use extra battery? And yes, it does. So if you do have that disabled, you might get a little less. But obviously, I was testing with HyperSmooth enabled because that's what you're essentially buying it for as well. Now, other than that, in terms of build quality and design, nothing else much to report other than the fact that it has got a touchscreen. Now GoPro have kind of like revamped the UI, however I'm still not a big fan of it. It does feel still a bit clunky and a bit slow. Now if you swipe up from the top, you get 4 quick action buttons, and then you can enter preferences where you can adjust all the sort of settings. Voice control settings are quite cool as well, because you can ask the GoPro to record whilst it's still off. So for example, if you had this mounted on your head and you had it off, you can say GoPro start recording, and it would wake up the GoPro. In other words, it will get it off from being off and then start recording. A really cool little function there, which can be useful for certain people. For example, if you're a skier. Now if you swipe up, you'll get to your media, so obviously I've got no media at the moment because I've transferred them all to my computer. If you were to swipe left, it switches it time-lapse. If you swipe right, it goes back to video, and then swipe right again, it goes into photo mode. Now within each mode you've got different settings, so for example in photo mode you can choose the field of view between wide and linear. You can even change the shutter, in other words you can have a little 30-second delay, and you can shoot raw and even tune to your settings. So Pro Tune allows you to have exposure settings, ISO settings, and all that you'd want, mainly made for, as almost the name would suggest, for pros. Of course, if you're a videophile or a camera nut, then of course go ahead and play around with those settings, because GoPro enables you to do so. Now the video settings are very much the same. You've got auto light mode, field of view, Pro Tune, and stabilization. Now the stabilization is set on auto by default, and that's something I'd highly suggest leaving it on. Of course you can't switch that off for any given reason. So for example, if you have a gimbal and you want to kind of disable that. But in terms of the recording resolutions, something I want to cover, it does 4K 60 FPS, which is kind of like a norm now from the GoPro Hero 6 Black. However, you got 2.7K at also at 120 FPS, although stabilization is not supported, and also at 1080p you can also shoot HyperSmooth at 60 FPS, standard stabilization at 120 FPS, and you can shoot a huge 240 FPS with a 16:9 ratio at 1080p. Now that's pretty cool. Now obviously, well, I'll say obviously, stabilization is unfortunately not supported at this resolution and frame rate, but it's just something that's really nice if you want to have those super slow shots. So props to GoPro for upping their ante when it comes to resolution and frame rates. Now, as I said before, you can change the aspect ratio between 16:9 and 4:3, although stabilization isn't perfectly supported at 4:3. So for example, 4K 30 FPS over here doesn't support stabilization at 4:3. Change it to 16:9 and suddenly you've got it. So just bear that in mind in case you want to shoot at 4:3 for some reason. So other than that, let me talk about the app functionality. Now the app I did find was a little bit hit and miss. Sometimes it wouldn't quite pair up. But as you can see right now, it is perfectly working seamlessly. It's got a little bit of a lag, but that is obviously nothing to be worried about. The GoPro uses a 5 GHz or 2.4 GHz frequency, so I think right now it's using a 5 GHz frequency because my phone is capable of that. So you'll be pleased to know, obviously, if you're using an older phone, then you can use a 2.4 GHz band. But just bear in mind that if you're going to be looking at a 4K 60 FPS sort of view, that you might see a little bit more lag or a poor quality on your phone, depending on the band that you're connected on. Now within the phone's app, as in the GoPro app, there's a variety of different things you can do. For example, you can shoot directly. So for example, if I wanted to take a photo, I could take a photo directly from the app. But what's most interesting about the app is its live functionalities. Now you can set up live over here, and live will set up via Facebook Live, and you can record up to a 720p resolution, which is great. But here's kind of like the party trick that the GoPro has, is the fact that you can finally shoot in portrait mode natively. Now, why would this be of interest? Now, obviously, if you are someone who shares via social networks, then you will be pleased to know that the live functionality is great because, the portrait functionality and the live functionality is great because now people on their phones will be able to see what you're seeing on your GoPro. It's a small little function, and the fact that it auto rotates is great. It even picks it up on the app. Now let's just try and see if this is going to work. So there we go, it opens up, and now if I just do that, it should automatically rotate. You can see now I've got the full screen of my phone. That's really cool, small little feature, but it's great for Instagrammers or bloggers who rather shoot in portrait mode. And that means you don't have to edit the file afterwards in, say, Quick Capture. So within the app as well, you can also edit your clips via Quick Stories. A very nice integration, and it imports your media directly to the app, and then you can just stitch up some small bits and bobs. Very useful if you are someone who wants to share on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or just to share to your family and friends, or if you're someone who is a bit like me, a bit lazy and doesn't want to go through fancy editing software and just wants something to stitch it up for your holiday videos, then you can do that via the app. So the app is quite good, but sometimes I felt that there was some disconnectivity issues between the app and the camera. Sometimes the app wouldn't quite pick up the camera. Now let's get into the business end of this review, and let's talk about the actual picture and the video quality of the GoPro. Now, as I said before, I'm comparing it to the YI 4K Plus. However, I have previously seen the Hero 6 Black, which is its predecessor, and well, I compared it like for like with the Hero 7 Black. Now, right now you'll be able to see on your screen a set of pictures. Now, what I'm going to start with is this kind of scenic picture that I found on Lewisham, what I took with the GoPro camera. Now, this is a still photography shot, and now you'll be able to see the YI equivalent of this image. The differences between the two images are pretty simple. There's a little bit more dynamic range on the GoPro camera. The sun at the top right hand side isn't as over bloated and oversaturated as it is on the YI camera. Moving on to the next scene, you've got a sort of trees in front of you and some greenery and a little bit of a pavement. Again, over here, the YI camera seems a little bit duller, still very impressive, but when compared to the GoPro Hero 7 Black, the Hero 7 Black brings out that vivid tone and doesn't oversaturate, but brings out those tones just a lot better. What's quite interesting to note in this scene is that you've got a very nice contrast ratio between the little pavement, the green, and the skyline are all merged into one. Now, I'm not one for selfies, and I'm probably lying when I'm saying that, but when it comes to selfies, the reason I've got this sort of mug shot is not to prove it to the police. It's more the fact that I was looking at my skin tone. Now, what I found again on the Hero 7 Black, it was able to reproduce my skin tones just a little bit better. The YI 4K again does a fantastic job, but does look a little bit duller, so I do look a little bit less pink, let's put it that way. Again, it's not massively against the YI 4K Plus, it's more the fact that the GoPro Hero 7 does an even better job. So now, pictures aside and still photography aside, how do these cameras do when it comes to recording? Now, when it comes to recording, what I did on this video is that this video is rendered at 1080p 60 FPS, and of course there's all this compression with Sony Vegas and everything like that, and that's the editing software I use. What I suggest you guys do is look in the description below. I have got the videos uploaded to YouTube on RAW, as in their native format. I haven't edited it, they're direct uploads straight from the cameras to YouTube. So you'll have two videos running at 1080p 60 FPS. Now that video was shot, and you might be wondering why at 1080p 60 FPS, simply to test the stabilization of both. Now, at that resolution and at that frame rate, both of them support EIS, in other words, electronic image stabilization, and GoPro uses its HyperSmooth technology, which is EIS as well. It's like an advanced version of EIS. And you might be wondering, well, why couldn't the YI 4K do that? Well, it does that at 30 FPS. However, what I chose to do is at 4K 60 FPS record both on both cameras as well, obviously without the EIS enabled on the YI 4K, but here this was purely to determine the quality of the camera. So those two videos, or should I say the four videos, two of each camera, they've got two different purposes. So first of all, let's talk about the quality, as in how does the at 4K 60 FPS, how do these cameras compare? So first of all, this image that you'll see in front of you right now, again almost similar to the image that I took before with the camera. Over here you'll see a great sort of amount of detail and a great sort of contrast ratio and sort of saturation throughout the image. Yet again, it's just a little bit step above the YI 4K. However, here the differences are very minimal. It's not a sort of a night and day difference. Again, switching to another image, looking at the trees and sort of the foliage and the log on the left hand side. Here again you will see that the YI camera looks a little bit duller than the GoPro equivalent. Yet again, the similarities are close, but I would choose the GoPro over the YI 4K purely based on quality. Then finally we move into a sort of a selfie that I was panning around yet again over here. I'm not trying to send it to the police or have a mugshot. It's more the fact that I wanted to see my skin tones, and here I would say almost the Y4K does a slightly better job. It's very, very small differences over here, but in terms of recording, I felt that the Y4K was just that little bit above. But that was to do with my skin tones, but when you look at the background, you see the trees and the skyline. Here I felt that the GoPro was better able to handle sort of the contrast and the overall saturation of the image, which looked a bit more vivid and a little bit more lifelike as well, because that's how it looked like in person. So here are the differences, in my opinion, are very small in terms of the overall quality that these two cameras can do. In a nutshell, video quality wise, I felt that the cameras are pretty much on par with each other, very good. However, there's one thing I didn't cover in my test shots when I was outside. It's low light performance. Now, the low light performance on the Hero 7 is a lot better than the Y4K Plus and better than the Hero 6 Black before it. The way that it can portray low light and the way it has that dynamic range, it means that the Hero 7 Black, you get a lot more image quality and detail in low light photography or low light videos, and it's specifically in videos you do notice the difference. There's a lot more video, or shall I say image noise, in the background on the Y4K, whereas the Hero 7 Black does a lot better job. So definitely in terms of if you're going to be taking for low lights, then the Hero 7 Black is definitely going to come out on top. So now let's go on to the little quick clips. Now I've quickly I'm going to put them into this video and just talk about them. It looks a bit weird. Looks a bit weird. Now those two short clips, obviously on the Y4K and the GoPro Hero 7, you'll be able to see they're very short. As I said, the full clips will be in down description below. But the reason I'm putting these two clips within this video is because you can see the differences. There's that small little difference in terms of the jittery nature of the Y4K Plus, and this is where the HyperSmooth technology, and more specifically with the GoPro running at with that technology, you get a fantastic sort of experience. You get a nice gimbal-like stabilization. So I really am impressed with that. It completely changes the world of action cameras, because a lot of people take action cameras like this, or they have them on their head mounts or on their chest mounts or something like that, and you often get this very jittery video. Better still, you can even have that on time-lapse mode, which the company call Time Warp, and therefore you can have very nice time lapses which have all been stabilized via HyperSmooth technology. That's really impressive for an action camera. What would I say about HyperSmooth technology as a whole? Does it replace a gimbal? Well, simply put, it is not ever going to replace a gimbal, because it doesn't have 3-axis gyroscope built in. I mean, GoPro does have those sort of functions, however, it will never replace the motory sort of functions that you would get on a gimbal. So it doesn't replace a gimbal, but for those who don't want to have a gimbal and want a decent enough experience, then Hero 7 Black is by far a kind of like a gimbal-like replacement. If, however, you are a professional videophile or someone who wants to be taking super smooth video and don't want any sort of weird jittery effect, then a gimbal is by far going to be a better better experience. In fact, combining HyperSmooth technology with a gimbal, you'll get the smoothest experience you've probably ever seen on an action camera. So no, it doesn't replace a gimbal, but I can see why GoPro used a sort of marketing gimbal-like stabilization without the gimbal, is because people can kind of relate to that. Because if you wanted a sort of smooth sort of smooth video, you would definitely need a gimbal with certain cameras like this, or that are using EIS, or even without sort of any stabilization. So ultimately, is the Hero 7 Black worth it? Is it worth £380 or $400? Normally, I would say that's a very expensive price tag to pay for an action camera, and I think when I reviewed this Y4K, it was kind of similar. It was around £300 to £400. It was quite expensive, but there is a lot you're paying for on the Hero 7 Black, and you're getting a lot of features in it to the point that it made me think, well, if I had the money, what else camera would I want? Or if someone asked me what is the best action camera I could potentially buy and I don't have a budget, the Hero 7 Black takes the cake. It is absolutely incredible, from the way it does all the different resolutions at different frame rates, the fact that it's waterproof out the box, you don't need an external case, the fact that it's got a very nice camera sort of in terms of lens quality, and the fact that when it comes to video quality, the HyperSmooth technology means that you don't really need a gimbal if you're not a professional. It is really fantastic. And even in terms of audio quality, which is something I forgot to touch upon, the audio quality has been improved from the previous iteration, and therefore you get a much better experience as well there. You get more sort of bassy tones and sort of less sibilance at the top end as well. So overall, it's a fully comprehensive action camera, which no action camera in the past has ever been able to combine all these features and put them all into one little box like this, and something that you can pocket and yet you can take out and take some incredible photos, videos, and stabilized time lapses even. So long story short, this camera is definitely the best action camera on the market. I would highly suggest it. Of course, if you don't have the budget, don't mind the lack of waterproofing, then for £220 you can get something like this, the Y4K Plus, which I highly suggest, especially in terms of its video quality. It is fantastic and sensational. And even its interface is by far better than GoPro's take on it. But if you want the best, as I said before, then get the Hero 7 Black. So there we go, guys. That's been my honest video and my honest opinion about the products. If you have got any questions, make sure you ask me down in the description below, in the comments below, sorry. Make sure, again, you check out the description below for those 4 videos that I mentioned, and you guys can put them on separate tabs and then compare them, and let me know what you think of the cameras, or what the best action camera is in the market for you guys as well, or if you had the chance to try something like this. And more than anything, if you can like, comment, subscribe, favorite, and share, it always helps the channel grow. It helps me do a little bit better videos, and encourages me to spend a bit more time editing and rendering and all that jazz that some people don't see in the background. Anyway, I've been Totally Dubbed. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Take care, and bye-bye.